So for those of you who are not familiar with cancer surveillance, I thought I'd give a brief 101 of what is the context of this work. So in the U.S., cancer surveillance is we track every cancer case that's diagnosed or treated within each state in the country. And there are several different groups here. There are each facility, like a hospital or a outpatient facility, will report into their state. Those facilities that are accredited by the College of American Surgeons will report into this red thing on the left, the National Cancer Database. And then a subset of those state cancer registries are funded by CDC to do reporting, and another subset of them are funded by the National Cancer Institute to report to SEER. So very confusing, but basically this is each state collects all the cancer cases within its region, and in that activity it's a public health reporting, so it's exempt from HIPAA, and it's a high volume, and that's some of the problems that we're trying to solve are because of that context. So the SEER program funded by NCA covers about 30% of the US population, and these are some of the states that are funded by SEER. So Seattle happens to be not a full state, but a region around the Puget Sound region is funded. So in addition to the standard data collection, that group does additional quality control, and they are more aggressive about tracking every single case, and they track survival, which the other ones don't. So we follow those patients until the end of life. The goals of the SEER program is within the NCI Surveillance Research Program in the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences. And the big goals for the SEER program, imagine this is a very expensive program. A lot of it is done manually, like tumor registrars looking at a medical record, typing in information all across the country. So that can add up to maybe tens of millions of dollars a year to sustain at this scale. So 30% of the US population, it's about 500,000 new cases acquired per year. That's new, and we still follow the existing cases. So we have some scalability and efficiency problems. So we're looking into things like natural language processing and other forms of automation to improve the efficiency, as well as to improve kind of reliability and accuracy. You can imagine there might be some variation in processing at individual registries, or the states might have some variations. Like, how can we tighten up those confidence intervals? The other thing we're looking at is linkages. So is there a way to do an end run around to the problem of data acquisition? Could we go directly to genomic testing companies, acquire their data directly, and then provide it out to the states? Could we go to claims, like payers, acquire claims data and use that to augment the cancer registry data? Can we acquire pharmacy data directly from Walgreens and CVS and Rite Aid? So these are some of the things we're trying to do is direct data acquisition. Then in addition to those, we have data quality improvement initiatives. And then if you think of this think of this almost like a national park or something. It's a resource that's used by a lot of people to do research. How do we grow it, make it relevant to today, where cancer patients are living longer, have more complex treatments, so more information around them? How do we build it up and sustain it with budget cuts and everything? So my branch is the Informatics, Surveillance Informatics branch, really cool title. This is them. It's an animated, but I won't show you the animation. This is your tax dollars at work. So we run a lot of the data acquisition and linkage projects. We also run improvements to the SEER'DMS system. The SEER'DMS is the data management system that runs all of these central registries that are part of the SEER program. It's mandated that all of them use this system. So this is a huge change. 10 years ago, each of the sites used a different system. So there was any kind of integration or standardization or efficiencies were impossible. But as of 2018, the last of the SEER sites will be all on the same system, all in the same data centers. So now we can start to find the most efficient practices or develop modules in one that work for all. So we're in a really good position to enhance those. And then we've started up some other initiatives to try to further automation and use of the data towards the idea of precision medicine at a population level. So one of those is the Department of Energy collaboration. This is the groups that have the national labs like Oak Ridge Lab, Argonne Lab, Livermore Lab that have some of the fastest supercomputers in the world. I think China now has all the fastest ones, but we're still in the top 10. We also collaborate across agencies like Center for Disease Control, FDA, on things like, they're trying to advance natural language processing as well, and we try to do solutions that'll work across the federal government if possible. We're also working on things like de-identification. If we can do reliable de-identification of clinical notes, then we can make those more broadly available rather than keeping them behind firewalls and gateways. And then we use natural language processing for continuous quality improvement of the data. So quick overview of data acquisition and linkages. These are the kinds of things that we're going after. Right now, the SEER program gets electronic pathology reports on almost all of the cases. In excess of about 80% of the new cancer cases have an associated electronic path report. So if we can use NLP on path reports, that would be a huge win. Like I said before, we're going after pharmacy data, Walgreens and CVS. Those things are underway. Radiology reports, if we can get them, because a lot of cancer recurrence shows up in like chest x-rays and CT scans. Radiation oncology data, rather than abstracting that, we're going to see if we can acquire that directly from the big providers of radiation oncology medical equipment like Varian and Electa. Genomic data, we've already acquired some of the breast cancer diagnostics from Genomic Health, and we're going after other types of broadly used genomic testing data. Not to do like whole genome sequencing in this area, but just what are those clinically actionable tests or the panels that are commonly used at hospitals. We're also going after comorbidities and other diagnoses through claims data, procedures also through claims data, and ultimately patient-generated data. We were looking at places like Patients Like Me and similar groups. So going after data wherever it might live. Then we'll have that problem of how the heck do you assemble that into a story and a knowledge representation structure that is amenable to data mining and computing. So stacking all of those things into a patient trajectory is a huge challenge in our group. A quick overview of the SEER'DMS enhancements. So this to me is a personal passion, is that when we introduce things like natural language processing and machine learning based automations, we still have many people involved in the job, and there's an importance to make sure that we balance what is good for the people in the process, where can they be most valuable in the process, how can we not make their jobs awful through automation. So we want to do all of these automation enhancements within a framework of human-centered design, human-computer interaction design. So we are in the process of contracting with a major design firm to set up a plan for that, do site visits out to these registries and ethnographic work to make sure that we set up a plan so that as we do these enhancements, they're all evaluated for usability, like cognitive load, all these things, and that we build this into everything that we do. So I think that's going to be huge. So the Department of Energy collaboration, this is pretty exciting. This is probably a lot of my work right now. Was the idea of the Department of Energy labs have these huge honking computers and the staff who know how to use them, and at the NCI we have computational problems that we're tackling piecemeal through individual grants or individual centers that potentially, if we pull these problems together centrally, we might be able to tackle them more effectively. So the plan for the Department of Energy Pilot 3, there's multiple pilots in this space, but the Pilot 3 is in cancer surveillance, population science. With that, we're working on the natural language processing using trying to use deep learning methods. Unlike most centers that may only have a few hundred or a few thousand cases and documents that are annotated to work with, we have, like I say, 500,000 new cases per year. We can generate tens of thousands of documents for training these algorithms, so it's more feasible at our scale. The second aim of this interaction is, once we've pulled all of these data sources together, it's modeling those patient trajectories and doing visualizations of patient trajectories across multiple types of heterogeneous data. And then the last is building the infrastructure for predictive modeling and eventually prescriptive modeling, where you're just predicting things like what is the survival after this kind of treatment, and then the prescriptive would be, what should I do? I walk in the door and I have these treatment choices available. What should I do? So some kind of simulation and modeling using all of these new data sources. So that's what we're after. So the challenges in this context are, how do we develop things that scale? Literally, my work at Fred Hutch with LabKey was working with a center that brings in 5,000 or 6,000 new patients per year, and we're talking 2 orders of magnitude more. A typical hospital may deal with their own internal labs and maybe a couple external labs, and we deal with like 360 different labs across this space. So we need to deal with scale. We also need to generate data like annotation, so training data and validation data sets for these algorithms that are annotated consistently, and do that in a scalable, reliable way. In addition, we want the algorithms, in order to make them useful, it needs not to just be, say, like this algorithm for the site of cancer. We can't just say like, in general, this performs like at 98%. So what would the performance of this algorithm mean if I was a cancer registrar and I was sitting down to do my work and I see this document, how sure is the algorithm on that document when it runs for that field on that document? So we're planning to wrap these natural language processing algorithms within an uncertainty quantification framework. This is what we're partnering with some of the labs on, so that we can say per document, per field, how accurate are these algorithms. And then to scale this to do multiple types of annotation at the same time, and I'll show a little more of that later. And then tracking and sharing this data all the way through to a portal that the DOE labs can use. So the role of LabKey is a core part of our infrastructure here. So we take, basically, through our third-party contractors, IMS, Information Management Systems, they're the ones who have the data centers that host all of these, the SEER'DMS application that all of these centers run. So they have the electronic path reports. So they act as an agent of the registries. And so at our request, they export sets of documents to islands that we've set up that run LabKey server. All of this is within these secure enclaves. Because although it's HIPAA exempt, it needs to be still owned by the state or controlled by data use agreements that are authorized by the state. So anyway, IMS, acting on behalf of the registries, will load items from production into these secure islands that have LabKey server on them. And after those are loaded up, so we gather it from the registries, then we coordinate, using the LabKey server, we coordinate the annotation of those documents, like labeling what is in those documents. Then we arrange those documents into packages and ship them off to a data portal that is also hosted in LabKey, where we regulate access to them. Sounds very simple. So this is just a brief screenshot. I won't dig into the details, but there are some administrative screens within that we've worked with LabKey to set up for administering these tasks, like assigning documents to annotate to contractors who act as annotators, assigning people to review those documents, and then for each of the people who are annotating the documents or reviewing the documents, their working list and where they are in their list. And then the actual day-to-day work, what this actually looks like is bringing up a text document. This one's unformatted. Unfortunately, this is the older version. LabKey's already made some changes to this, so it looks prettier. But this is a path report, a fake path report. And so somebody will look at the list on the left. This is the schema. These are the things that we want to extract out of this document. So for example, was the ALK test performed? And then a drop-down list of yes, no. And then on the right, they would look for the evidence in the document of whether or not that test was performed. So what that looks like in practice is highlighting, like selecting a field on the left and then showing the highlights on the right and being able to go in there with your cursor and highlight pieces of text that provide evidence for a value you selected. So this is used both to create the training data to do these deep learning algorithms. It's also used to correct or provide corrective information. So we can take a version of those tools, run them, have the tool, the NLP tool, generate this, and then have a human review the output of the tool. So it's meant to be a multi-purpose interface. And then ultimately, the LabKey instance that's used to share this data with the Department of Energy labs, we call the Free the Data portal. It looks something like this, really simple. So, seems easy enough. So this is the workflow. We've been working on the last year just to get a couple packages through this entire process and have realized it's far more complex, especially at the NCI where we have so many different stakeholders involved in this process. So there are, on the bottom left-hand corner, you can't see it, but imagine you can see it. There's like 25 different people color-coded by where they're coming from. So about half a dozen organizations, 25 different people potentially looking at these, either involved in annotating or looking at the results of annotation or approving some steps of this process. So optimistically, we can get through from an idea that we want to annotate something like, let's get site histology, laterality, stage, grade from a path report. From that concept until actually having a package delivered to the data sharing portal could be as long as 9 or 10 months if everything goes swimmingly. If we already have something underway, like a schema developed, should be about 6 months from schema development to a finished package. Anytime we revise, that's 3.5 months. And these are optimistic. This has been really helpful actually to sketch this entire process out and give everybody a reality check. Like, do we really need to have 25 people review every document? Maybe not. We'll see. That's pretty expensive. So the lessons learned, so far we've been engaged in this for about 1.5 years with the Department of Energy. We haven't scaled up to volume, although people went into this thinking, let's do 10,000 documents a month. Right now we're scaling for the complexity in that vast diagram and for data quality. And then eventually, once we get that worked out, we'll scale up the velocity and thereby increase the volume. Before we started this, we looked at many different document annotations tools. Most of them were built for individual research projects with a few hundred or maybe a few thousand documents. They were not built for this kind of scale, and they weren't built to run within a secure environment. So all of these things have to have access controls in place. And then because I've worked with LabKey, I think on 2 or more, at least 2 or 3 relatively large projects, one of my lessons learned that I brought here was engage LabKey as a partner. So LabKey's been a partner all throughout this, in the calls, in the weekly updates, to see what's going on and to give us some guidance. So the results, in order to get this far, we had to put in place, I think the first year of this was IRB files and data use agreements. We have a total of about 28 different data use agreements to get data that is owned by the states. This is just 4 participating states to 4 participating Department of Energy labs. So that was a huge result, but that's in place now. So we can actually move data all the way from states to the labs at a pretty high volume. And where we are now, we have multiple instances of LabKey up and running in these secure enclaves. This is state-specific secure enclaves, like Louisiana has a Louisiana enclave, Georgia has a Georgia enclave. And we've annotated 3 batches of path reports, pulling out what we thought was a quick win, low-hanging fruit. These are the jokes now. There is no such thing as a quick win or low-hanging fruit in the federal government. So 3 batches of that we've annotated. And we've made some enhancements to the platform, and we have further enhancements in progress. So what we've completed so far enhancing this platform, and none of this, we didn't do this ourselves. Also at NCI, we don't do anything ourselves. We do everything through contracts and grants and other things. So LabKey did this. Development of some tools that make the process of administering this a little bit easier. So batch assignment of cases, being able to point to different metadata files to run different schemas at the same time, being able to replicate our template, like when we set this up, instead of having to manually configure a lot of things, being able to just run a template, making that ugly XML document display you saw earlier pretty, that's already done. And then the ability to have second and third review steps or multiple review steps on approved results to support that really complex workflow you saw earlier, and just the ongoing provision of help desk support and as part of the partnership. So then phase 2, which is already in progress, is kind of a more friendly structured export of data to researchers, basically in a JSON format. This would be exporting the documents and the labels associated with the documents so that they could be used for machine learning. And then one problem we've encountered when we've scaled up is non-printable characters. So we keep running into surprising characters which mess with the user interface highlighting functionality. And so we've seen this enough times that we wanted to build in some of that functionality to strip those out on the LabKey side. Two of the other enhancements underway are for the data sharing portal so that we can make that a little bit more robust. And then multiple drop-downs, values in the annotation schema so that instead of having to set up a whole bunch of yes-no fields, we can make that a little more efficient. And then the future plans, we'll start annotating reports for breast cancer recurrence pretty soon. We've got algorithms coming out from the Department of Energy Labs with the NLP for 5 things for site laterality, histology, grade, and behavior within an uncertainty quantification framework. And we'll start deploying and using the LabKey platform for people to review those. And then I have a list of enhancements, potential enhancements for 2018. Things like integrating those algorithms, having multiple annotators with an adjudication step, branching logic for annotation schemas, case-level annotation. This one's a tough one. Like, what if you have 5 different path reports, a radiology report, some lab results, and you're trying to draw a conclusion from those? So it's not mapping one-to-one. It's taking many sources, mapping to one final result. And that's a case that happens a lot in cancer or clinical research databases. So we want to be able to build in that functionality. And then just some refinements to the workflow and the UI. And I will jump to questions. This is huge effort. You saw so many people involved. These are some, definitely not everybody, but just some key people on my staff from IMS, our contractor, our Department of Energy Labs, LabKey, the Registries, and other contributors. A lot of this work spun out of my work with Fred Hutch and Emily Silgard there was instrumental in getting that started. That's all I have to present. I'm open for questions.
Just a very quick question. Is the IMS you talk about the Quintiles IMS?
It's a different IMS.
I was going to say, it's not the artist formerly known as IMS.
No. This is Information Management Systems. They're a contractor, and they run our data centers, and they develop the DMS application. Yeah,
okay.
Different IMS. They're also not the IMS Health, another IMS.
It's the same thing.
Oh, that's the Quintiles. No. Yes.
So when you, actually I like the presentation a lot. So when you actually use NLP to process those text or getting structure the data, how accurate is it? And do you need to have a experts to validate it later?
Absolutely. Good question. So how accurate are the NLP algorithms? Accuracy varies by field. So like histology might be different than side, like laterality, left or right, very accurate and with very simple algorithms. Something like a cancer site might be much less accurate. So it varies by the field, and it may vary by the registry. So what we've done is we've set targets for minimal acceptable accuracy. And I think these are kind of emerging in the industry a little bit. Like 95 is too low, 99 most people say is good. Some people say 100, but that's not realistic. So I think we're going for 97.5 to 99 as just as a starting point for accuracy. And accuracy would be like the F score, so a balanced of precision and recall there. So that's what we're starting with, but we may have to adjust it. Ultimately, these algorithms have to be acceptable to the people who are using them to support their day-to-day work. So then and to me, that's where this uncertainty quantification comes in. It's not just that if I give you an algorithm and say it's 97%, how accurate is it on this one field in front of me right now? So we want to get that in place and test within this usability framework, like what are people, what will people accept? When will they start to trust it? And then we'll start to use it. Yeah. So long-winded answer.
Yeah, I have another question. So SEER database, so you pour all these different data into. I'm thinking about it. It could be long term could be a very good knowledge system. So it's gonna be used like IBM